And the results really speak for themselves. The Nintendo Game Boy flew off the shelves. And success breeds success. As it was selling well, that just attracted more and more companies to develop games. So in a way, it's kind of a vicious cycle. And I do feel bad for some of the other companies, which could have, some of those other handhelds might could have had the lion's share had they had something to really gin up that initial success. But for the most part, they didn't. The Game Gear was the closest one to having any significant success. It was basically number 2 in the handheld market. But even then, didn't really have very much in terms of killer apps. It did have Sonic. It did have Columns, I suppose. But it didn't have anything that people were just clamoring to buy. It was more relying just on the hardware. The ads were about how that it was in full color, whereas the Game Boy used a monochrome display. But there was a side effect to that. Having backlight, having full color meant that the Game Gear drained batteries like it was going out of style, frankly. Whereas the Game Boy, with its to put that into perspective for those of you who are, perhaps didn't have Game Gear or perhaps weren't alive during this period, the Game Boy, when it came out, used 4 AA batteries. Okay? And it had a battery, it could use those 4 AA batteries could last, I think, around 10 to 12 hours, if memory serves. Whereas the Game Gear used 6 AA batteries, and it would last about 3 hours. Actually, probably less than that, probably 2 hours. And when you're talking about a portable system, if you're constantly having to change out the batteries, you're constantly having to worry about it dying, that's a major problem in terms of its playability. On top of that, if you're constantly having to buy batteries for it, that's a significant cost. And again, I think that's something that Nintendo understood. They wanted to try to get something that was energy efficient. They wanted to try to get something that consumers could reliably play without having to change batteries every few hours. And something that, again, would be cost efficient. And the Game Boy is remarkably cost efficient, especially at the time. In fact, even today, it would only cost about, if the price point was about $80, that would be about $160 today. So $160 for a handheld console is... Actually, I don't know. I bought a handheld console recently. But the point stands. The point stands that Nintendo made some very wise decisions when it came to design. Okay, I've blathered on about the business and technical sides of the Game Boy, so let's talk a little bit about games. Specifically, let's talk about the game I've been playing this whole time. This is Super Mario World. This is... I'm pretty certain this was a launch title. I might be wrong, but I think this was a launch title. It wasn't the prepackaged game. In the US, the prepackaged game was Tetris because it's Tetris. Enough said. Its initial lineup for the Game Boy wasn't overly impressive. Nintendo did make some wise decisions when it came to developing a Mario title for the Game Boy, which was scale it down, make it to where that you could see what was going on, even on the screen, without a high contrast rate. So they did well in terms of that. But this Game Boy game was actually, this Mario game was not developed by the creator of the Mario franchise, Shigeru Miyamoto. This was actually developed by, I think this was developed by the R&D 2 division. Might have been the R&D 1 division. This was actually developed by a different team, which explains why this game is, well, significantly different from the other Mario games of the time. For instance, you're not actually going through the Mushroom Kingdom. Instead, you're going through various lands which are vaguely patterned after real-world locations. For instance, we started out in an Egypt-themed level, then we went to a seaside or ocean-themed level, now we're apparently at Easter Island. Although technically, in story, these are different lands, and we are not actually we're not rescuing the captured Princess Peach or Princess Toadstool. In this game, instead, this is the origin of Princess Daisy. So for those of you who know Princess Daisy primarily from any of the Mario Party or Mario Kart or Mario Golf or any of the Mario sports titles, and you don't know where she came from, well, this is where she came from. In fact, this is the only non-sports or party title that she has been this is the only traditional style Mario platform that she has been a part of. Which is a shame, because I actually really like Daisy. She's one of my favorite. I don't know, there's just something about her. Maybe it's the color of her hair, maybe it's her tomboy approach, I don't know what it is. I like Daisy. Daisy's cool. But Mario is off in Sarasala Land, I think. Trying to rescue Princess Daisy. So apparently Mario does contract work even outside of Mushroom Kingdom. Although technically this is not considered canon according to Shigeru Miyamoto, which is probably why Daisy has never reappeared in any of the official Mario games since the Mario Party and Mario sports titles are non-canonical. Now again, Nintendo went with a design decision to kind of scale everything down a bit to make the proportions in terms of the size of Mario relative to everything that's going on around him about the same as it was on the NES, which again I think was a wise decision. It did mean that it was a little bit more difficult to see what was going on, but at the same time, you had enough visual space between Mario and anything that would be coming after him to actually have decent reaction time. Whereas with, say, Sonic on the Sega handhelds, they didn't give nearly as much visual space, making it much easier to get hit. Now, Nintendo did decide with the follow-up to this, the Super Mario Land: The Six Golden Coins, they did decide to actually zoom in the camera and make Mario more defined, but they also made certain that, still, even with that, to give enough visual space and tweak the gameplay ever so slightly to where that even with that reduced space, you could still play the game and not feel like you're being cheated. So good design decisions, I would say all around. I do not, unfortunately, have 6 golden coins. I would like a copy of it, but it's not been a priority in terms of me seeking it out, and I died right before the ending. But it has not been a priority in terms of me seeking it out, and I'm not willing to pay that much for it. So maybe at some point I will actually get that title, but not right now. One element that would be carried over to the 6 golden coins is the idea of having the opportunity for a bonus area at the end of each stage. In the traditional, in the original Mario game, Super Mario Brothers, Mario would jump on the flagpole for extra points. There wasn't actually any kind of bonus game. But in this one, if you go for the top exit, then you will get the opportunity to play the little mini-game that we just saw, where you can get extra lives or a power-up. And of course, this would carry on to almost every other, many of the other Mario games, such as, for instance, Mario World, where you would try to jump through the gate, and if you succeeded in snagging the tape on the gate, you would get points which would count towards a bonus game, where again you could get extra lives. So I think this actually does predate Super Mario Bros. 3, 1989. I don't think Super Mario Bros. 3 came out in the US until 1990. So this actually would be the first time we had. Well, no, that's not true. I take that back. We actually did have a bonus game at the end of each level in Super Mario Bros. 2 if you picked up any coins, because you could play the slot machine. So, no, I guess this didn't play again, side note for anybody who's listening, feel free to jump in the chat. Nobody's in there right now. Being in the chat makes you cool, makes you special, makes you just a really awesome person, and you will be appreciated more by your peers. You will succeed at work, and you'll be rich and famous. Or it just means that you'll get to chat with us, and but that still makes you cool in my book, so that's something. So feel free to jump in the chat. I'd love to hear from you. As far as enemies go, the enemies are similar in some ways to traditional Mario enemies, but they're also a little different in other ways, such as you don't have the traditional Koopa Troopas in this particular game. Instead, you have what look like turtles, but if you actually stomp on them, as you see repeatedly, they turn into bombs, which can kill you. So that's it's a little tweak to it, but it's interesting, I suppose. Gives this game its own unique flavor. Okay. The game is fairly short, consisting of only 4 worlds with 3 stages per world. Success. So we're already over halfway through the game. And that was the other thing about Game Boy games, is that they were generally designed to be played in one sitting, or if they weren't designed to be played in one sitting, they would have some sort of battery or password backup. Again, when you're designing games for any kind of handheld, you really have to keep in mind the kind of platform you're designing for. Not just for technical specs, but also for how people will be playing it. For instance, if you create a game that's meant to be played in very short spurts, basically, Handheld would definitely be the platform to do that on. That's, I think, why we have seen a variety, so much success in the iPhone and Android market in terms of game design, because it's relatively inexpensive to develop for, and you can create smaller games that don't require nearly as much R&D work to be successful, and can still be wildly popular. Look at Angry Birds. If that was on a console, I don't think I would really want to play it, but you know, playing a few rounds of it, you know, on your phone while you're doing while you're waiting on a bus, or waiting in line at the DMV, or you know, just sitting around on your couch, that actually works out fairly well. Again, it's meant to be played in short little jolts. Similarly, this one is also designed to be played with smaller little jolts.